Nothing, once touched by the hand of chaos, remains untainted. You are under the dominion of the Ordo Malleus to assist my investigations into a world that has already felt that fell's influence. Graia has been under the close watch of the Inquisition since the Grim Skull War. The Forge world remains largely secure, but we have picked up concerning energy readings in the surrounding system. I have my suspicions, although we have not had sufficient time to pinpoint the origin of these foul energies.
Greetings, sons, daughters, and in-betweens of the Imperium. May the Emperor bestow his favor upon thee all, especially to those who have shown your loyalty to him by supporting this humble channel. It is that time of the week once more where I, the great Oracle 8-bit academic, brings you some light-hearted but also somewhat educational entertainment in the form of world lore and awesome video games. In today's episode, I am once again going to be raving about one of the best franchises to ever exist since the dawn of time, and that, as I'm sure you could already tell by now, is Warhammer 40K. Well, the best franchise whenever writers at Games Workshop aren't making dumb lore retcons that don't make any sense.
We had a good thing, you stupid son of a bitch. It was perfect, but no, you just had to blow it up. You and your pride and your ego. You just had to be the man. If you'd done your job, known your place, we'd all be fine right now.
But before we get into all that, let's take a look at today's video game feature, which again is an example of something that looks old school but actually came out in the year 2023. And man, is it to this day one of the most fun games I've played in a long time.
None can stand against the might of the Imperium. My love of the Imperium is matched only by my hatred of the heretic.
Satisfying.
Warhammer 40,000 Boltgun is your typical first-person shooter with retro-looking graphics and gameplay clearly inspired by OG titles like Doom and Quake, which was developed by Auroch Entertainment and is set to get a sequel sometime in 2026. Taking place on the Forge world Graia, several years after the events of the first Warhammer 40,000 Space Marine game, you, the player, takes the role of Millennium, a Stern Guard veteran Space Marine of the Ultramarines chapter, sent by the Inquisition to planet Graia on a mission to investigate some blatantly heretical bullshit, and to put a stop to said heresy by blasting it with a bolt around to the face in the name of the Emperor.
You'll drown in your own blood. Death is the reward for heresy.
In a nutshell though, if you enjoyed the recently revived Doom trilogy, you'd feel right at home with Boltgun, since Malum Kado is basically the Doomslayer reincarnated into the Warhammer 40k universe, and who brings down the imperial dildo of brutal consequences onto the tender anuses of all heretics, chaos cultists, chaos demons, and even greater demons of the chaos gods of Nurgle and Tzeentch, the same way Doomslayer or Doomguy does to the forces of hell in the Doom games. On a scale of beta male to giga chad, this one will definitely make your testosterone levels skyrocket to the point of you looking like a Mike O'Hearn meme.
Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me no more.
So anyway, the reason I decided to do yet another Warhammer 40k related video is because, well, it's just so damn cool. Like, what other reason is there? I mean, why else would we spend our entire life savings and put ourselves into debt for 10 lifetimes in order to purchase boxes upon boxes of plastic figurines, on which we will spend years to paint just one of them while leaving the rest in a grey pile of shame?
I'm tired, boss.
But for real, earlier this year I had already made 2 attempts at giving a brief explanation about Warhammer 40K and what the possible historical and fictional influences were behind its expansive Grimdark universe. Links down below in the comments if you wish to go check those 2 out. But looking at those 2 early episodes, which were basically among the first 10 or so videos I made, my ever so artistically critical self feels like I could have done better, and that maybe I should have instead broken up my explanation and lore dives of each faction into separate videos, rather than trying to cram everything into one episode.
Warhammer 40K is set in the grimdark future of the 41st millennium, where 4 distinct factions of intelligent civilizations fight against each other for survival and dominance in a never-ending war within the Milky Way galaxy. In the backdrop of this forever war are the Chaos Gods, entities that reside within an alternate reality known as the Immaterium or the Warp, and these evil beings treat all life as their playthings as they continue to compete with one another in a great game.
So as a result, I decided to do just that, make a series of videos once in a while over the coming months, taking a deep dive into each faction within the universe of Warhammer 40K, and maybe even a few peeks into Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar as well, when I finally get around to recording some footage of me playing Vermintide on Steam. I really want to do this because I've become a massive fan of both 40K and Age of Sigmar over the past 2 years, and also because I know that all my friends are going to be watching this video, and this is yet another one of my desperate attempts to convince them to join the cult of the 40,000 Warhammers, so that I can stop feeling so lonely as the only person in my circle of friends that's really into praising the Emperor.
I can inform a resident. What is your name?
I said Jesus Christ. Right now. Right now.
What is your message to the homeowners?
Right now!
So with all that being said, let's start off the first episode of this once in a blue moon Warhammer series by talking about what essentially are the promotional mascots and poster boys of the entire franchise, the Space Marines. So in order to talk about the Space Marines, we first have to briefly go over the setting of Warhammer 40K. Essentially, when Games Workshop, the now corporate dictatorship brains behind the franchise, first created what would essentially be the sole reason why tabletop gaming nerds would go bankrupt in their mid-30s, they came up with a promotional tagline that would basically describe the setting of the 41st millennium, which goes as follows: "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war." This not only had served as a really efficient way of summarizing the absolute shitfest that is Warhammer 40,000 into a single sentence, but also ended up spawning an entire genre of sci-fi and fantasy fiction, which has become known as Grimdark, which I also made a more detailed video about, linked down below.
It's sprawling, it's big, it's fun, it's fucked up. Granted, it's fucked up, but I see it as a meditation on cults, hero worship, mass murder, suicide, everything. It's life.
So within this grimdark world, or rather galaxy, one can easily tell from the get-go that things aren't so great, since Grimdark as a genre itself is not really about heroes versus villains and saving the day, but more about doing what is necessary to survive in an utterly bleak and hopeless environment, even if what is necessary is both morally questionable and sometimes borderline barbaric. This then paints for us a picture of the galaxy-spanning Imperium of Man in the 41st millennium, an empire that stretches across trillions of planets and star systems, whose founder, the godlike being known as the Emperor or Master of Mankind, is trapped in a broken and comatose state, resembling a barely alive corpse, upon a golden throne which is essentially an eternal life support system, while his subjects wage a never-ending war to defend their crumbling empire from a host of enemies who wish to see humanity either enslaved, devoured, or utterly erased from existence. Across the Imperium on millions of worlds, the Astra Militarum or Imperial military forces spend their daily lives taking on the machinations of evil chaos gods and their demon hordes, as well as hostile alien races, or Xenos as they are called, in the name of their once mighty god emperor. The Astra Militarum itself consisting of the many different branches that take up arms to fight the good fight against the Galactic Empire's many foes. Some of these branches, which include the multiple Imperial Guard regiments, the Imperial Navy with its massive thundering warships that do battle among the stars, the Imperial Air Force, and of course the Space Marine Legions, just to mention a few. As well as the more fantastical ones like the Legiones Scutari or Tech Guard, who are the cyborg soldiers of the cybernetically enhanced Adeptus Mechanicus of Mars, and their massive bipedal mechs known as Titans or God Machines, with the largest of them being the Imperator class Titan. Now, outside of the Astra Militarum, there also exist other factions and units that aid both directly and indirectly in the fight for humanity's survival in this bleak and brutal universe, such as the Imperial Inquisition, whose job it is to root out rebellion, any and all affiliation with Xenos or aliens, heresy or just any sort of anti-imperial behavior or actions, and basically anything that is deemed an internal threat to the Imperium, going so far as to commit crimes against humanity if they need to, in order to maintain the status quo and to keep the Imperium from collapsing within. They operate quite similarly to the real-life examples of the many secret police or counterintelligence organizations that have existed throughout human history, such as the Cheka, NKVD, or KGB in the Soviet Union, the Apartheid era, Special Branch or Secret Police of South Africa, and even China's Central Investigation Department. But basically, they can be thought of as the typical counterinsurgency or anti-rebel, state-controlled organization that spies on its own citizens, disseminates propaganda, and makes sure that everyone pledges allegiance to the totalitarian ruler in charge, else they get tortured, executed, or sent to the nearest gulag. Then there are also the rogue traders, who you could think of as the Imperium's explorers or frontiersmen, whose job it is to go out and explore the galaxy beyond the furthest reaches of the Empire, but who also have the authority to start or end wars, wipe out entire populations if need be, and stamp out heresy whenever they come across it. But the focus of today's video, as mentioned before, would be the big burly men with jacked up levels of testosterone thanks to super steroids, armed to the teeth with chainswords and what is essentially a handheld missile launcher in the shape of an assault rifle or a shotgun. The Adeptus Astartes, or as most people know them, the Space Marines.
Void, we march as one, our ships deployed, forged in fire, trained to kill, warriors of the Emperor's will. For the Imperium we stand tall, no fear, no doubt, we answer the call. We are the Space Marines, forged in war, with chainsword swinging, we settle the score. No mercy given, armored
Now, as most of you already know if you have watched my previous video, Warhammer 40K for the most part is an extremely popular and expensive tabletop game, much like Dungeons & Dragons or Battletech. Except that in 40K, majority of matches consist of one player's army going up against the army of another player in an overly complicated game of chess where moves and attacks are determined by dice rolls. The rules as well can differ between each type of game. For example, the rules of a simple and quick skirmish match will differ from that of a large-scale battle, but for the most part, the abilities and tactics of each faction will more or less stay the same across game types, but there may be specific modifications and adjustments depending on the game mode and the scale to make each match within the various game types more balanced and fair regardless of factional differences. The very first appearance of the Space Marines would be in Warhammer 40,000 Rogue Trader in the year 1987, which was also the very first appearance of the tabletop game itself, as a sort of early spin on Games Workshop's other flagship tabletop franchise at the time, Warhammer Fantasy, which was first released in 1983. Initially, the idea behind Rogue Trader was basically just a sci-fi spin on the themes, characters and medieval tropes found in fantasy battle, with many of the factions being carried over to the setting of 40K, like the Orcs and Elves, who essentially became Space Orcs and Space Elves, magic users becoming Psykers, and Paladins or Knights becoming Space Marines, and so on. It would only be in the year 1990 when the Space Marines would actually get some sort of a backstory in the book Realm of Chaos, The Lost and the Damned, written by former Games Workshop employees Rick Priestley and Brian Ansell. It introduced the original 20 Space Marine Legions, as well as their Primarchs, who are essentially the high-ranking generals of each Space Marine chapter. In this book, there was also the very first mention of the Horus Heresy, the civil war of the 30th millennium in which 9 of the legions converted to the worship of the Chaos Gods and rebelled against the Emperor, after one of the Primarchs, the Imperial War Master Horus Lupercal, willingly giving himself over to Chaos and uniting the traitor Space Marine legions against the Imperium.
If you will not seize it, then I will! So let it be war!
Dear President Vladimir Putin, I'm so sorry that I was not your mother. If I was your mother, you would have been so loved, held in the arms of joyous light. Never would the stories plight the world unfurled before our eyes, a pure demise of nations sitting peaceful under a night sky. If I was your mother, the world would have been warm. So much laughter and joy, and nothing would harm. I can't imagine the stain, the soul-stealing pain that the little boy you must have seen and believed, and
2 of the original 20 legions and their respective Primarchs are not named and are described as redacted from the records of the Imperium within the lore. Rick Priestley explained that this was to illustrate the Imperium's practice of erasing embarrassing or incriminating events and figures from Imperial records, the same way many authoritarian governments would do throughout history. A good example of this are the many political purges and erasure of records regarding certain government officials that got on the wrong side of Joseph Stalin during his iron-fisted rule of the Soviet Union. Later on, further additions to the overall lore of 40K would be added that expanded on the background of the Space Marines. A specific high point in human civilization is mentioned, which is known in current lore as the Dark Age of Technology, wherein humanity reached such heights in technological development that we effectively became the masters of the Milky Way galaxy, with self-aware AI guiding our way, until a galactic-scale robot uprising orchestrated by the so-called Men of Iron brought the human species to its knees, and even though we won in the end, it was at an extremely great cost, which would cause humanity to regress back into the Dark Ages, with all human-occupied planets being completely cut off from one another and being at the mercy of hostile alien invasions. In the background of human history, a godlike immortal psycho who would eventually become known as the Emperor of Mankind would begin to build an army of genetically enhanced super soldiers called the Thunder Warriors to regain control from the brutal techno-barbarian tribes and restore order to a now post-apocalyptic Earth, after which he would have the Thunder Warriors annihilated by his genetically superior custodian guard, since they were mentally unstable and had served their purpose of uniting the Earth under his absolute rule. The Emperor, however, would go on to improve on the technology and bioengineering processes he used to create the Thunder Warriors in order to create the first Space Marines from the genetic makeup of his very own sons, the Primarchs, who themselves were genetically engineered beings created from the Emperor's own genetic template. While they share the Emperor's DNA and are considered his sons in a genetic sense, they were created as unique individuals to be specialized military commanders, not as identical copies or clones, with each of them possessing different personality traits and being skilled in various aspects of both warfare and regular tasks. From there, the Emperor would then take to the stars with his Space Marines and reconquer all the lost human worlds and strike back against humanity's alien foes in a great crusade, reforging the galactic human empire under his rule until the betrayal of his most trusted Primarch Horus, and the subsequent civil war, which would not only see the Emperor mortally wounded and interred on the Golden Throne as a life support system for the next 10,000 years, but also result in the decay and slow collapse of the Imperium of Man, as it descended into a state of constant civil war against the traitor Space Marine legions who have now fallen to the dark and twisted influences of the Chaos Gods, as well as increased authoritarianism and brutal dictatorship, with superstition and religious fanaticism at an all-time high, as more and more of the Imperium's citizens begin to see the Emperor as a god rather than a mighty ruler. Which in my opinion kinda makes sense. I mean, if not a god in the 40k universe, then why able to do god things? I mean, he's immortal, he can shapeshift, he can influence the warp, he can bend space-time, he can transcend his mortal body and reincarnate into a new form, he can become a chaos god if he wanted to, he can kinda manipulate reality, he can shoot Kamehameha waves and Hadoukens that put both Ryu and Goku to shame. I kinda get why the Black Templars revere him as such.
Quite a deadly battle. Thank the Emperor we made it out in one piece.
God, Emperor.
Well, not all of us view him in that way. After all, the Codex Astartes does not support such religious dogma.
Well, not all of us believe in the teachings of the Codex. Some of us find solace and courage in the worship of a higher being.
Yes, the Omnissiah.
No, the God Emperor.
Yes, the God Emperor is the Omnissiah. We speak of the same.
No, we're not.
Oh, I'm quite sure you are. Both of your legions ceaselessly sending empty prayers to your hollow gods.
Don't you dare speak of him that way. Show respect for who created you.
I do. I respect the true Emperor, not a sensationalized myth made to justify barbaric savagery among your legions.
Why, you little...
Now, aside from the previously mentioned Custodes, which I will do a more detailed video on in the future, the Space Marines or Adeptus Astartes are foremost amongst the defenders of humanity, the greatest of the Emperor of Mankind's warriors. They are barely human at all, but superhuman, having been made superior in all aspects to a normal man by a harsh regimen of genetic modification, psychological conditioning and rigorous training. The Astartes are physically stronger, far more resilient, and often mentally far removed from the lot of most normal unaugmented human beings. In the presence of the Astartes, most Imperial citizens fear a combination of awe and fear, and many cultures on the more primitive worlds of the galaxy simply worship them outright as demigods or angels of the God Emperor made flesh, and who in essence are the last line of defense against the innumerable enemies of the Imperium and humanity. As is often mentioned in the lore, most human citizens of the Imperium can go their entire lives without seeing a Space Marine, and if they do, they should be very concerned, because it means that things have gotten so bad that the Imperial Guard have failed in defending a planet, and thus the Space Marines have to be called in as a last resort to attempt to turn the tide of war in the Imperium's favor once again. Or it could mean that they're about to be fist-fucked so hard into oblivion by traitor Marines who now worship the evil Chaos Gods.
As you know, I'm a man of special needs. You will now receive the Fist of Fury. Prepare the long rubber glove. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I wonder where my glove will go.
Now currently in 40k lore, there exists about 1,000 or more Space Marine chapters that operate across the Milky Way galaxy, defending, conquering and reclaiming lost territories of the Imperium, each with their own unique culture, battle strategies and tactics, martial disciplines, combat methods and drip. But despite these differences, majority of them follow a strict code of honor or set of rules, which is referred to as the Codex Astartes, as well as engaging in the practice of preserving and passing on gene seed, which is the genetic material of their respective Primarchs. This practice mainly serving to, of course, create more Space Marines, since they can't reproduce the way normal people do, being made sterile after their transformation procedures, and to ensure the survival of their chapter. So when a Space Marine dies in battle, it is up to his chapter brothers to collect his gene seed so that it may be implanted and passed on to a potential new recruit. The Codex Astartes itself was implemented after the Horus Heresy in an effort to break up the 9 remaining Space Marine chapters who didn't fall to chaos or turn traitor, since it was believed that they had each grown too vast in their number of militant personnel. Thus each of the remaining 9 had to split their numbers and create new chapters from the same gene seed of their Primarchs, with no chapter being allowed to have more than 1,000 Marines in its ranks. Though exceptions do exist, such as with the Black Templars Space Marine chapter, whose ranks far exceed 1,000 members, with some estimates in lore placing their membership at around 10,000 instead. And while the Codex serves as a sort of strict code of honor, there are some chapters who do not abide by it at all, provided they still maintain their loyalty and service to the Imperium. Now in terms of historical influence, when it comes to the Codex Astartes, I'm reminded of the various codes of honor that have existed among warrior castes throughout human history, the most glaring example being that of the chivalric code that supposedly existed among the knights of medieval Europe. The chivalric code was a moral and social code of conduct for noble knights, emphasizing virtues like courage, honor, loyalty and courtesy. It combined a warrior ethos with Christian piety and courtly manners to guide their behavior, including duties to their lord, the church, the weak, and to women. There was no single universally agreed upon list, but it centered on ideals such as protecting the defenseless, serving the church, upholding justice, and maintaining one's word. But despite all this, loyalty to the church and one's lord was of the utmost importance, sometimes even surpassing the importance of those other, lesser codes of honor like protecting the meek. If your lord told you to slaughter a village of peasants, well, shame. In a similar way, over in the Far East, there existed various codes of honor, such as the Bushido code in samurai culture. However, it must be noted that just like medieval knights over in Europe, there wasn't one centralized and overall agreed upon set of rules either, but that once again, loyalty to one's lord was of the highest importance and also considered the greatest honor. So too the Adeptus Astartes or Space Marines, while being the protectors of humanity, consider their loyalty to the Imperium itself and to the Emperor to be more important than the lives of ordinary humans. Many a Space Marine chapter may actually look down on regular unaugmented humans, seeing them more as cannon fodder and cowards rather than actual capable warriors. Unless you're a salamander, of course. Salamanders are said to care deeply for ordinary humans, sometimes even forfeiting their service to the Imperium to save as many human lives as possible. But if you're a filthy alien child, well...
Finish her! Scorpion wins. Fatality.
Even with regards to recruitment of new aspirants or potential Space Marines, one can compare the overall process to modern military boot camps, but even more so to historical training of knights and other warriors throughout history. It is believed by most historians today that the process of becoming the equivalent of a human tank in shiny armor with a pointy stick took many years to achieve, and that many a would-be knight would begin their training at roughly between the ages of 7 and 10, first starting their journey as a page or servant in a nobleman's castle, where at this stage they would have learned basic skills like horse riding, hunting and serving at table, as well as maintaining the castle and the noble's estate. Around age 14, they would become a squire or servant apprentice to another knight, assisting said knight with his armor, weapons and horses while learning more advanced combat skills, before potentially being knighted around the age of 21 if they have successfully passed all trials and survived their training. In the same way, most aspirants or new recruits of any given Space Marine chapter are trained and tried from an extremely young age, where they have to not only endure the brutal tests and trials of whichever Space Marine Legion they're recruited into as well as being subject to intense indoctrination and mental conditioning, but also have to undergo the traumatic and gruesome genetic experiments that implant them with their Primarch's gene seed and transform them into the demigod super soldiers that take on the Imperium's deadly foes, with most aspirants or neophytes not surviving even the initial trials, where the exact number being somewhere around 1 out of 100 becoming full-fledged battle brothers of a given Space Marine chapter. There's also a second genetic transformation which has been added to the current 40k lore, which is when a Space Marine becomes a Primaris Marine. This sees them undergoing further genetic and physical alterations, turning them into a sort of Super Space Marine rather than a regular one.
I don't know what you two are talking about, but you, what do you say you and me go for a ride?
Where you guys, right on the bus?
Yeah, I got an extra seat on my bike.
Yeah. I know where the bike trail is.
Oh, you do know where the bike trail is? That's funny, I was asking before, but that's great, that's perfect.
Yeah, it's a good thing, he likes it.
Come on, come with me.
Me?
Yeah,
what are you
you.
guys gonna do?
Get out of here.
Take it to the back and I'll...
us.
I might go.
Come with me.
I'm gonna go.
I'm gonna fuck him.
Oh.
What?
Oh, alright.
Who's fucking who?
I could guess he is.
Should I, save him?
No, I think he wants it though, right?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
Oh.
Now, as mentioned earlier, it seems as though the primary inspiration behind the Space Marines are the historical knights and cataphracts of medieval Europe. The cataphracts being a type of heavy armored cavalry that came out of Eastern Europe and particularly the Byzantine Empire, which served as the precursor to the noble knight. In almost every aspect of the Space Marines and their various chapters, one can see the clear influence of both classical and medieval European history, even with regards to the structure of the Imperium itself and its high Gothic styled architecture being quite similar to that of the Holy Roman Empire and the late medieval period. Down to the armor designs of the Space Marines, it is not hard to see how much of it was indeed inspired by the various ever-evolving armor designs that medieval knights would wear from the 8th century right through to the late 15th and early 16th century, with some Space Marine chapters such as the Dark Angels, Grey Knights and the Black Templars being pretty on the nose about it. There's also quite a lot of inspiration taken from ancient Roman centurions and legionaries as well. At least in terms of the so-called warrior culture that exists among the Space Marines, but I would personally argue that the aforementioned Thunder Warriors fit the role of sci-fi Roman legions more, with the Space Marines being sci-fi knights. But in essence, the best way to think of your typical Space Marine would be that of being a grimdark futuristic warrior monk. Similar to the warrior monks of the Shaolin Temple or the militant Buddhist monks of feudal Japan, who were known as the Sohei, who would defend their temples from bandits and power-hungry warlords alike. But since Warhammer 40k is as British as they come, a better historical example would be the various holy or religious orders of knights that existed since the First Crusade, such as the Knights Templar, the Teutonic Order, the Knights Hospitalers, and the Order of Calatrava, to mention a few. I mean, my favorite Space Marine chapter, the Black Templars, clearly took a lot of inspiration from these Crusader-era knightly orders, in particular the Templars, Teutonics, and the Hospitallers. So no identity politics loving woke-tivists, they were not inspired by Nazis at all. The black and white Iron Cross they wear predates World War II and is actually inspired from the various cross-putty symbols of the Crusaders all the way back in the 12th century AD, and would only be adopted as the German military symbol back in the year 1813 during the height of the Prussian Empire and the Napoleonic Wars. Go and learn some actual history rather than getting your information from TikToks, subreddits, Facebook posts, Twitter and Blue Sky posts as well. Now there are two other armor variations of the Space Marines I'd like to take a look at, but which don't seem to have any real world historical inspirations. That being the Terminator armor, which is a type of heavy armor worn by some Space Marines, and the mechanized armor worn by a Space Marine Dreadnought. The Terminator armor in lore is said to be a sort of lost technology that dates back to the Unification Wars and the Great Crusade, led by the Emperor himself. Terminator armor is an advanced form of powered combat armor developed for close quarters melee and ranged fighting done by Space Marine Terminators, for whom slaying power is more important than maneuverability. These suits are primarily utilized in situations where standard Space Marine power armor does not provide enough protection for a warrior, and so through sacrificing agility and speed and maxing out their strength and defense stats like a Dark Souls tank boy, a Space Marine who has earned the honor of wearing Terminator armor gains an extra thick layer of ceramite plated protection, ceramite being the fictional material which Imperial armor is made up of. The Dreadnaughts, on the other hand, are quite a morbid creation of the Imperium. It is said that when a legendary Space Marine is mortally wounded in battle, or wounded to the point where he can no longer fight, his duty to the Imperium does not end at all, for the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus will try to squeeze every last bit of warrior potential out of him even when he can no longer move his physical body. Such an unfortunate Marine will then be interred within a mechanical bipedal coffin, outfitted with powerful weaponry and kept alive by various stimulants and chemicals to continue their service to the Emperor against the alien and demonic enemies of man.
Rest, brother. Not enough left of me to save a second time. One last time.
In Warhammer 40K, there has been quite a lot of debate regarding the absence of female Space Marines, and not to mention the controversy surrounding the sudden inclusion of female Custodes, which, contrary to the popular belief of it just being another attempt at forced diversity, in my personal opinion, I think that Games Workshop simply wanted to try and sell more Custodes miniatures, so they thought that by including a Mommydom version, us lonely virgin wizard nerds were going to bite and purchase them like hotcakes.
Requested my presence. Face to face.
To be clear, it was not a request.
Wow, big lady.
Yeah, big lady! Big lady! Step on me!
However, there is an actual in-law reason for why female Space Marines don't exist, and it has something to do with their gene seed not being compatible with female humans. Though, while I admittedly have to learn more about that specific law, looking at the levels of brutality, physical abuse, mental trauma, gruesome experiments and bodily violations which young boys are subject to when they become Space Marine aspirants, why anyone would want that same procedure to be inflicted on young girls in the 40K universe is beyond me, and makes me question your internet search history. Besides, women already have to deal with becoming potential Daemon Kulabas if they get captured and enslaved by Chaos Marines. By the way, whatever you do, resist your morbid curiosity and do not search up what Daemon Kulabas are. It's probably the most fucked up thing in 40k that even surpasses the grim darkness of its entire setting.
Meow.
But just because there aren't any female Space Marines doesn't mean we don't get to have badass female warriors that give their lives in service to the Emperor, or in their case, the God Emperor. Enter the Space Marine adjacent and religiously fanatical Sisters of Battle, or Adepta Sororitas, who also get to sport their very own power armor and modified bolter pistols and rifles, and who instead of gene seed and genetic enhancements are juiced up on the magic of Christmas, or rather the power of faith. Now, I won't go into too much detail about the sisters since I feel like they deserve their own dedicated episode, but for now, you can basically think of them as grimdark sci-fi warrior nuns with an extreme zeal for serving the Emperor in battle, whom they view as a god. Not too dissimilar from the previously mentioned Black Templars, and given how terrible the setting of Warhammer 40k is, it kinda makes sense to have faith in something higher than yourself, even if that faith leads to barbaric behavior. I mean, even the barbaric behavior sometimes makes a lot of sense, given the fact that literal demons can spawn at any given location if someone leans into their impure thoughts a little too hard.
Brothers and sisters, rejoice. Pleasure beyond imagining awaits you. Desire.
The Sisters of Battle seem to take quite a lot of inspiration from both fictional and historical warrior women. A few that come to mind would be that of the Viking Shield Maidens, or even the all-female Amazonian warriors in Greek myth. The zeal of the Adepta Sororitas goes so far that it sometimes gives them some insane plot armor, but also allows them the ability to manifest supernatural beings, such as Saint Celestine, who in the lore is said to have been a devout sister who became a martyr after being slain on the battlefield in service to the God Emperor, but thanks to her faith in him before death, she was kinda resurrected somehow, and has become a living battle saint, which on numerous occasions has returned to rescue Imperial forces in danger of being destroyed by the enemies of the Imperium. This not only brings to mind the many claims of religious people who throughout history have witnessed the apparitions of Mother Mary, but also two historical examples of warrior women who, driven by their religious faith, were able to turn the tide of war and inspire others to take up arms in the most dire situations against powerful foes. Joan of Arc, who today is regarded as the patron saint of France among French Christians, was a young woman during the 100 Years' War between her country and England in the early 1400s. She is claimed to have received visions from God that inspired her to go to war against the invading English, and her almost maniacal level of zeal in turn also inspired many a French knight, peasant and warrior to take up arms alongside her in defense of their homeland. So one can definitely view the Adepta Sororitas as a sort of army made up entirely of Joan of Arcs. Then there's also the Japanese Shinto priestess Ohori Tsuruhime, who during the Sengoku period led an army of peasant militiamen and warrior monks against an invading samurai clan of their home province of Omishima, after proclaiming herself to be the living avatar of the local shrine's deity, Myojin of Mishima. In the end though, one can definitely see how the Space Marines, despite all their multiple historical and fictional influences, even from examples like the Sardaukar in Dune, Stormtroopers in Star Wars, and the Marines in Starship Troopers became the pop culture icon they are today, and essentially the bread and butter of Games Workshop. I mean, just look at how fucking cool they are. And as one begins to get more into Warhammer 40k lore, you come to find many Space Marine chapters that draw inspiration from even weirder sources, such as the Blood Angels, basically being roided up vampires, in power armor, or the Space Wolves, who have strong Viking cultural influences but could also be thought of as space furries. Werewolves. The Carcharodons, with their shark-like motifs and appearances, being a strange result of their lore writer at GW being too much of a Jaws fan. The Raven Guard, who also draw inspiration supposedly from Native American culture, but seem to be what happened after their Primarch fucked a crow or something. And then the Black Dragons, who seem to be the result of the Emperor thinking dragon scales and claws on their physical bodies was a good idea. And finally the White Scars, who are basically just the Mongol horde in space, just to mention a few. But the list could go on and on, because there are indeed a vast number of Space Marine chapters, which is kinda what makes the concept of these sci-fi warrior monks so cool. There are so many to choose from, or even create yourself if you're into painting minis or playing the tabletop. Hello Kitty or Barbie Marines can definitely be a thing if you want it to be. And once you dive deeper into the lore, you will definitely come across a handful of them that fit your personal tastes. As I said in my previous Warhammer 40k video, there really is something for everyone here. If you are able to accept that 99.9% of the time, everything is absolutely fucked beyond being fucked in the setting of this Grimdark universe. Over in Warhammer Fantasy and Age of Sigmar, the closest comparisons would be that of the Bretonnian Knights of the Realm, or the Stormcast Eternals who serve the God King Sigmar. But I will leave their lore and possible fictional and historical influences for another video, since this one is already long enough. To finally conclude this video though, I would like to list my personal favorite Space Marine chapters from Warhammer 40k, which are as follows. The Dark Angels, because they seem to be the most knightly of all the chapters. Black Templars, because they literally have the best drip and are just a bunch of weaponized autistic aura farmers with extreme religious zeal. Not to mention how awesome the Hell's Reach novels were, and their chaplain Grimaldus being such a badass, as well as their chapter masters Sigismund and Halbrecht. Ultramarines, cause I mean come on, they are literally the poster boys of 40k, and their Primarch Reboot Gilliman is also a G. Salamanders, because they are the most humane of the lot, unless it's against an alien Eldar child, and their Primarch Vulcan is also pretty badass, even if it is currently taking him an extremely long time to come home to his kids since he first left to go buy cigarettes and milk from the store. Imperial Fists, because they are the forerunners of the Black Templars, and they were the first to defend Terra or Earth from the traitor Marine legions during the Horus Heresy. And lastly, the thieving Blood Ravens and the highly deceptive to the point of even confusing themselves Alpha Legion, mainly because the memes surrounding these last two chapters are fucking hilarious. And that brings us to the end of yet another video of me fanboying like a total basement dwelling neck-bearded nerd about Warhammer 40k. Rest assured I will definitely be making more of these in the future, not just because Warhammer is fucking awesome, but also because like with the many topics on this channel and just my overall interest in general, when I become obsessed with something, I have to know every single detail there is to know about said obsession, even down to its history and how exactly such concepts and ideas came about and where they drew their primary inspirations from. Anyway, apologies for the long ass nerdgasm, but I do hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. And remember to always be positive, and praise and glory be to Space King.
heretic. Be resolute in the face of heresy. Deal with it before its demonic force can manifest.